It looks like they're on.
Hello everyone. Hi there. My name's Anne Rowe. I'm the Head of Communications at SCVO. And I'm a complete imposter. I'm not supposed to be in front of you today, but Susan Smith, who's the editor of Third Force News, unfortunately couldn't come along today, so you've got me. That's why this session's probably going to be a little bit more interactive, and at the bits where Susan had slides filled with words, I'll be relying strongly on our lovely panel over there to explain what's going on. Obviously, though, at SCVO as well, we are an organisation that blogs, so I'll be able to contribute from that point of view. Meanwhile, on the panel, we've got a little bit of a mix of people to allow you to get contributions that are from an organisational perspective, a kind of personal blogging perspective, and from the side of journalists and reporters who are looking at other people's blogs, doing a lot of writing themselves. So hopefully you'll get a lot of different perspectives, and depending on what your own interest is, have the opportunity to ask the experts. So could I just ask the panel to each introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself? You can start, Graham. Go on.
Hiya, can you hear me?
Yes, you can. Okay. I don't. Yeah, my name's Graham Martin. I'm the news editor of Third Force News. I've got a background in journalism across, well, down south and Scotland, at a national and a regional level. I'm involved in writing and commissioning blogs for Third Force News, obviously. I have written quite a few blogs for TFN over the years. My ones have tended towards the political and sometimes controversial. So that's mostly the kind of stuff that I do. But obviously, I'm involved in commissioning blogs a lot and reading the stuff as it comes in. So I get a good idea about what we think makes a good blog.
Hi, I'm Robert Armour. I'm a reporter at Third Force News. I've been with TFN for about 17 years. I've saw it evolve since it was a kind of 4-page newsletter, TFN, back in the day. We used to do advertising with the big issue. And we then became an 8-page publication back in the 90s. And then we became a 12-page publication, which... It's a 16-page publication now, isn't it? It's a 16-page publication now. And obviously we went online too, so I was there and part of that evolution, which has been a huge seismic change for Third Force News. We are obviously still are print as well. I write blogs. I mostly do features, and my sort of personal interests in areas of specialisms, social justice, poverty, housing, and kind of more general interest as well in the third sector, governance, I should say. And that's me, yes.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Bray. I'm the fundraising manager at the Scottish Seabird Centre, and I've also been a fairly regular blogger with TFN for, I don't know, 6 years, maybe? I've lost count. Anyway, it was very much a paper edition when I started, and it's sort of moved on from being like a column to much more of a blog, which is exciting because you see it go up very quickly online and get the feedback very quickly as well, which we can talk about. I am largely a trust fundraiser, so I suppose I do write during the day. Blogging for me is a very different way of writing. I really enjoy the creative side of it. So I've got some personal blogs as well, which range from ticking things off a list of 40 things to do before I hit 40. Don't do the maths. And then I've got a science fiction one, and then I have one that I started recently about cutting out plastic for marine pollution, which is more linked to my work at the Seabird Centre, and then the regular one for TFN. And they're all quite different, so I'm happy to talk about the way that I've approached them and the changes that I've seen in the styles of blogging over the years. You all sound very solid into your social justice and things like that. Occasionally, my blogs will feature science fiction and cats, so sorry. I am also interested in social justice, but I probably have a lighter spin, I suppose, on my blogs, and I try to give positive messages, particularly for people who are working in the charity sector, because I think sometimes we get a bit of a raw deal and can feel a bit isolated, so maybe mine are slightly more motivational, I don't know. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Stewart. I'm Head of Communications at First Port, which is a development agency for social enterprise startups. And just give us a plug, we've got a stand through there in the main foyer if you want to go and see us. I started out as a journalist, same as Graham. My background was local and regional newspapers before I was poacher turned gamekeeper and crossed to the dark side of PR. My background in communications has been predominantly third sector and public sector. I've worked for disability organisations, children's charity, and latterly for First Port. I tend to write blogs these days, not in my own name, but in name of other people, such as chief execs or people like that. So it's not my own particular voice, it's more getting issues across on behalf of the organisations I work for. And the other thing I do quite a lot is editing other people's writing. So whether it's other people's blogs or articles or speeches or whatever. So I think that's something Susan was keen we touched on as well, was that's quite a tricky issue if you're issuing your chief executives, you know, prose that they've sort of laboured over for hours and you've got to completely rewrite it. So don't have to do that very often though. I don't think my chief exec's in the room. So, so yes, so we'll be talking about that issue as well as writing blogs in your own voice, but also editing other people's work. So, and these are the guys who we send our blogs to. And I've been writing for TFN, both blogs and obviously articles as well, for quite a number of years now.
Great. Well, hopefully you'll agree. We've got quite a lot of experience. And I just want to start off with a fairly obvious question. What's a blog? Can I just ask, in the room, could you put your hand up if you either write a personal blog or write blogs at the moment on behalf of your organisation? So we've got, yeah, that's great. So quite a few of you doing it. So hopefully you know what a blog is. Do the other people know what a blog is? Probably read other people's and, yeah. So yeah, we're talking about online and we're talking about commentary and opinion. One of the things that, sorry, I'm going to flick through our slides because I don't know what she was going to say there. This is a bit that means a lot to me. It's the same but different. I think what we want to have a bit of a talk about today are there is no silver bullet to getting a blog right. There is no one perfect way of writing. But there are lots of people you can ask and talk to about hints, tips, what might work, etc. But there are rules about, particularly online and with things like TFN, the length, what sorts of formats they might like, what sorts of additional thing they might want to get with it. We've talked here about kind of mixed media. I think when most people think about blogging, you will think traditionally about the writing, but vlogging is on the rise. And also along with blogging comes the whole issue of social media. Writing a blog and putting it up there, that's just one part of making a blog successful. The rest of it is about how do you get people to it, how do they know it's there, how do you know it's working. And Charlotte mentioned really quite importantly the whole issue of feedback as well. What do you do with feedback and when does it matter? So I think the first question where probably we can really get started and start thinking about it is, you know, why blog? Why blog? I always remember someone told me way back when Facebook was taking off, I was at a training session, he described Facebook as like a train at a station. And he was saying everyone seems to be jumping on the train, but nobody's checked to see where it's going. And I think blogging can be a very similar thing. Just because it exists and it's possible doesn't actually mean that you need to be doing it. And I think it's something to really think about. So I think just starting the conversation with why do individuals, people, organisations blog, but equally in some cases why maybe you shouldn't be blogging. So just in terms of the panel, maybe if we can start with Carol at the other end. You're talking about writing for people in your organisation, talking about a lot of editing. Why do you blog at First Port? What is the thinking behind it? And
Mainly our reason would be to raise awareness of what we do and try and drive people to us. We provide funding and business support for social enterprise startups, so we're maybe slightly different from some of your purposes. You'd maybe want to be raising funds, you might be wanting to promote a campaign. So there's all sorts of reasons why people would do it, you know, to build followers and so on, build engagement. I think our main reason for blogging would be the most basic is to raise awareness of what we do and get the message across of what we're there for. And that would, I would imagine that would be the main, most common reason people would have is to build engagement, because I think one of the things to get across, it's not a news page on your website, it's not a press release, you know, you're not sort of putting out an announcement or something like that. It's much more of a telling a story and trying to engage people by getting them to understand what it is you're about, and it's a much more informal way of doing that. And again, with the feedback, that's a way of actually sort of taking part in a conversation, really. So that would be the main reason we would do it, because a lot of people don't even know what social enterprise is. There might be something as basic as what is a social enterprise, and then using, I think with any, whether it's a news story or a blog or whatever, I think the best way to illustrate it is the human side of it. So rather than just coming out with lots of facts and figures, it's telling the story of somebody who maybe set up a social enterprise and what motivated them to do it. And that could be applied across the board, whether it's one of your service users or somebody who benefited from your services. It's using that human story to get across the message of what you're about.
And Charlotte, I'm assuming that you blog because you want to become famous, because that's what it. That's one of the options up here.
Yeah.
And in terms of your more personal blogging, what for you? What's the motivation behind doing blogs that are not in an organisational context?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to become famous. Let's make that clear.
I thought that.
I have always wanted to write, and I think storytelling is a really key part of it. I love telling stories, and as fundraisers, we tell stories as well. So it's just a very different kind of way of doing that. So from my personal point of view, it was just that I had written lots of articles, short stories, novels that sat in a drawer and I had no feedback from, and this thing called blogging came out, and I was a little bit kind of not really sure about internet storytelling, is that going to be a great thing? Is that as good as having something in print on a shelf or whatever? Absolutely, it's better because you can share it. So yeah, when I initially started, it was to raise awareness of the fact that I could write. It was to have a particular goal that I was moving towards, that I wanted people to read about and support me in and give me feedback for. So originally it was these sort of 40 goals that I was going to achieve. There is a bit of information in there, messages or things that you've found out about, which I enjoy sharing and getting people's thoughts on. But I think storytelling and the human element of it is quite important. I'm not really involved much in blogging for the Seabird Centre. And I think for me, sometimes I can be asked to try and promote a particular thing through a blog. And I have to be quite careful about it because I don't want it to become advertising, because my blogs are my personal blogs, even my TFN blogs are edited by TFN, but they're my personal opinion of something. So I think I would find it very difficult to be given an opinion or a subject and told to blog about it, because that's not how I work. So that's maybe quite different from the way that you would work. So it's very much not an advertising thing. I like the idea of creating a community as well. Like I say, I kind of hope that people read the TFN one and think, oh yeah, as a fundraiser I feel that sometimes, or yeah, I struggle with that, or I need to celebrate that thing. So creating a community of people. The other extent of that would be my science fiction one, which is again a community of people with a very niche interest. So I think that's it. Finding shared interests and creating an online community would be part of what I do with it.
And Graham, you talked about commissioning blogs. From the other side of it, when you're asking someone for a blog, why is it you're asking for a blog as opposed to writing a news piece about it or writing a feature about something? What's different, and what should people be thinking about once you've asked them for it?
I suppose you've got to look at why TFN carries blogs and what blogs are. Some things, for example, just aren't news stories. Somebody's opinion or someone's take on something, someone's analysis of something isn't a news story unless they happen to be particularly significant individuals or they're saying something which tips over at newsworthiness. But quite often it's just opinion, it's analysis, it's their take on stuff. There are other reasons why we carry blogs in TFN. Quite often it's because someone who's a blogger can cover a range of quite detailed stuff which we as a team simply just would not be able to do. I'm not going to lie about that. If you sat down and asked me to write 500 words on GDPR, I would run a mile. I would want nothing to do with it, which is why we ask people with expertise to write for us. often we when it gets to the really hyper-technical level, we have to hope that there's no coded messages in there or something we're missing, but so far that's never happened. But aye, so you know, blogs serve a range of purposes. There's loads of important things happening within the third sector, for example, which we just don't have the. We're generalists as journalists. We pick up a lot of stuff everywhere, but in very few circumstances are we experts. Usually the experts, usually best able to tell your story. We provide a platform for it, and that's where we hopefully give advice on how to hone those messages that we can use them.
And I thought, Robert, you might be able to tell us a little bit about when you get blogs in, how can you tell which ones are brilliant and which ones are not so good? Just for you personally, if something's coming in, what are the things that really make you think I'm going to use that, that's fine?
Well, like what Charlotte was saying there is that it's anything with a human interest story is, you know, people can personally relate to, always sells well, I think. But equally, if it's something that's very current and we have a reactive blog to that, that always sells well too. Something that's very well written and doesn't have, you know, the greatest, doesn't involve the greatest issue, can sometimes be, you know, really difficult for people to, you know, relate to. So, you know, we find that a bit. Yeah, it depends. In terms of anybody sending blogs to TFN, we like to think that we give everybody a platform. You know, we would like to include them, wouldn't we? You know, when we put things online, because we're there to serve the poultry sector. But I think one of the, for myself, is that when I get something in, recently there was a story that I wrote about, it was a press release, a rewrite of a press release, and normally it wasn't a groundbreaking press release, it was about a conference on Huntington's disease in Scotland, and basically when I read through it, one of the speakers at the conference had said that a cure for Huntington's was within reach, and that became the headline. Massive story. It became one of our biggest stories of the year, based on that headline, because it was true. I didn't know anything about Huntington's, but the guy who said it, I got in touch with him. I said, could you write us a blog on this? He was a doctor and a professor, I think, someone very intelligent. And he wrote us a blog that became, again, hugely successful. So that was kind of proactive, but if anybody is able to react in that way to something that's a huge issue, it will become, you know, they can get the publicity that they want, and I say that to all charities as well, is that you've got the brand, you've got the issue, write about it, tell us about it, tell other newspapers about it, and if you relate it to something that means a lot to you, I always think it does sell. It always will sell. And if it has got that human interest related to it too, that's what I always look for. There was a guy this week in TFN, a chap had sent in who had never blogged before. He's just taken a post. I can't remember what the organisation was, but he's a care experienced.
Who Cares Scotland?
Who Cares Scotland, yeah. A care experienced individual, and he's got a new post, and he wrote a really feely touchy, you know, piece on his experience care and his trajectory and getting to where he is today. It's a lovely wee story, and people relate to it, and it gets a lot of hits. And I just think no matter what the issue is, if you write, you know, from a personal perspective, it'll always sell well.
So one of the things that we thought might be helpful to share with all of you today was kind of lifting the lid a little bit on TFN. So now that Third Force News is online and we're able to track what people are interested in, we thought we'd let you see what the top 5 blogs were last year.
None of mine.
Graham and Robert, I wondered if maybe you could give some of your thoughts on it. Some of these blogs are on issues that just completely grabbed people's attention for a load of different reasons. So let me read you them, and you can maybe tell us. So the top one, the very, very top one, and it's almost not surprising at all. I can see Julie Christie, who is one of our funding experts in Scotland. How to grab a grant, TFN's guide to finding funders and persuading them to give you a grant. Everybody wants money. There you go. Second on the list is the strange but sadly inevitable case of Jerry Friedman, and that was you, Robert. What do you think it was about that blog that
I think it was a bit
means
of
it's sitting
voyeurism.
there.
I think everybody wanted to know who this guy Jerry Friedman was, and after I'd known him or known of him since 2007, I think.
Is it worth us explaining just who he is for those who didn't see the story? Yeah.
Well, Jerry Friedman was
How you brought him down?
a serial job applicant who feigned a number of disabilities to attend interview. He attended interviews, and on the back of it, he would write on his application that it was his right to be put up in hotels and get certain amounts of expenses, etc., under disability legislation. He preyed on smaller charities. Well, he preyed on all charities, but especially smaller ones who were risk averse, got scared, and often gave him what he wanted for him and his partner. And he'd been doing this for years, and I'd heard about it for years, but I was kind of too scared to write a story on him. And then eventually I was off for a while, and I came back with renewed enthusiasm. And somebody told me that he'd been applying again for jobs. So I thought, bingo, to hit the ground running. So I just put the boot into him and wrote a story about Jerry Friedman. I'd been in touch with him a number of times, and he gave me a few sort of comments like "leave me alone," basically. So I pieced everything together and thought it'd be quite good to be able to, sum up all these years of knowing Jerry Friedman but not knowing him. And so I wrote a blog, and the blog became really successful. The story was massive. The Sunday Times ran it, it became a huge, huge story. So on the back of that, the blog was big. And it was because basically it was because it was a reactive piece that was based on the success of the story. And I think it remains one of our biggest stories.
Also, people were really quite emotive about it as well, and it brought charities out of the woodwork coming to you, telling you that
I ended up dealing
had
with a
them in
police
touch as well.
inquiry, so I had to deal with all I had these charities coming to me and
We're
saying,
not suggesting you write blogs that get you into police inquiries.
Well, that was it. But the positive aspect to this, for me, it was about exposing Jerry Friedman for what he did to charities. I remember a girl in the Borders phoned me up. She worked for a small community organisation. She said that she'd been harassed so much by him that at night when she was locking the door, she was scared that he was going to be behind him. That's a guy that never turned up for interviews, by the way. You wouldn't really be scared of him. Well, I can understand people who didn't know him being scared of him, but he generally didn't turn up for the interview. He would turn up at the hotel and get his Pepsi Max and stuff that he ordered, he insisted upon. But so people were actually fearful of him, and I felt as if we had a duty to expose him. And I think the final nail in the coffin was the blog. It got a bit personal, and he reacted a wee bit to that. But that's the end of him, as far as you're concerned.
They mentioned the quality of his handshake and stuff.
That's right. Aye. Well, once he was dead, he told me he had a really limp handshake. So I thought that kind of personal, I think it really brought him down. He was just kind of, a withering attack.
So, I mean, in that case, although it's a true story, it's still about the story. It's an unusual and emotive story. The third one was a blog that Susan had written about Neil Oliver's role as NTS president. And I think in that case, it's probably more about the controversy than...
Yeah. I mean, to put this one in context, to be honest, the Neil Oliver thing, when Neil Oliver was appointed as president of the National Trust for Scotland, it became, this wasn't just a TFN story, though we covered it at the time, it became quite a big political story because of comments Neil Oliver had made about Scottish independence and the Highland clearances and various other things. The issue of Neil Oliver became one of these political footballs, which kind of ratcheted down the kind of the political ping pong table between the two entrenched unionist and nationalist positions, and all nuance was lost in the entire thing. It just became unionist versus nationalist, and Neil Oliver bouncing around somewhere. And we, as TFN, we ran a poll. We're well within our rights to run a poll. I wrote it saying, should Neil Oliver be the president of the National Trust for Scotland? Simple question. We weren't looking, but it was the weighted in any way towards anything. It just happened to be caught in that particular whirlpool where Scottish politics was heading at the time, still is. And it became like a big issue, and we got a lot of criticism for daring to ask this question. You can't put a foot right with these particular issues, and people's grievances over these things are massively multiplied with the use of social media. So we got a lot of flack, and Susan quite rightly wrote a blog defending us, defending TFN's position. Because another thing you can use a blog to do is if you feel you're not getting redress, well, you can write about it. We're lucky enough to have a platform that we can publish it on, but as another use for a blog, it's a form of rebuttal, as a form of putting your case when you feel you're not getting a hearing. We certainly didn't feel we were getting a hearing, particularly over asking a simple poll question. So that's why that blog did well, and also it did well because it's a well-written blog and stuff. Also, Neil Oliver's name was getting googled quite a lot by certain people, and that was coming up as part of the search. I'm sure that drove quite a lot of the traffic towards it. It was quite a big issue at the time. You've probably forgotten about it now. It was one of these ones that was quite a big deal for a week, you know. But yeah, so that's the background to that blog, and it did well. Yeah, anything to do with Neil Oliver was doing well for us that week. So we got a lot of stick, but we did what we had to do.
So you can see the ones that are written by TFN reporters and are up at the top are to do with things that are controversial, interesting, unusual, different. But the thing that I think is really interesting is you're talking about the top 5 there, and the next 2 are written by externals. So if you're thinking that this is of all the blogs that were up on Third Force News and these guys are writing brilliant content all the time, you know, it's a huge opportunity for organisations that when we look back at the blogs that did well, the 2 here are from external organisations and have been written and contributed in. So for me, there's a lesson there for all of you about thinking where you might put your content, or having the having some planning time to think about what you might do.
Yeah, I think number 5. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go back.
I'm just carrying the reins on it.
There you go.
It's just the top.
I've gone back.
No, I think number 5 is interesting because number 4, I know why that's done well. Blogs on this issue always do well because of the issue, named person. Really controversial, really, it's a bit divisive amongst a lot of people. Yeah, again, it falls into the whole nationalist unionist twilight zone, to be honest, because it's one of those issues. It's a Scottish Government issue. People oppose it because of that, blah, blah, blah. So I can see why that's done well. Anything we do in named person. In fact, we've got one blogger, Leslie Scott, she's from the Time Trust, which is an ME charity. She's got a particular interest in it, and she's submitted quite well-written blogs to us, so we'll use them. And if people disagree with what Leslie's take is in named person, writes a blog, we'll run it, as long as it's well enough written and it's, you know, it's coherent and whatever. The 5th one, though, the reason why I wanted to mention this is I was surprised a bit when I saw this, because I expect named person and things that are obviously controversial to be doing well as blogs. But the 5th one, this is what we would call pretty much a sector blog. Nobody with the third sector really, I don't think, would be that interested in this. But it's interesting, it shows how big the audience is for this sort of sector specific. So that's definitely a charity and a social enterprise. So most people struggle to tell what a charity is, never mind a social enterprise. So this is quite a, this says a lot to me about our audience. Our audience isn't just after you know, the controversial stuff. They're looking for information in blogs. They're looking for stuff specific to their organisation or how they conduct themselves as part of the third sector. So it's good to see those blogs doing well, actually.
Thank you. What we've got here then are just some of the thoughts that Susan had herself round about what makes for a good blog. Planning, very important. Engaging, having a hook, having a bang. Those are all Susan's points up there, but can I just go along then to Carol at the other end and say, you know, when you're either writing the blog yourself or taking someone else's and editing it, where do you start from? What's your...
I was saying, funny enough, I wrote my top tips and then Susan sent me her PowerPoint afterwards. It was amazing the amount of overlap, so we were obviously singing from the same hymn sheet. But yeah, one of the things I think we both said was stay focused, keep it focused, have 1 or 2 key points, and that actually applies to everything, whether it's you're doing a radio interview or writing a blog or whatever. Don't try and cover everything, just have 1 or 2 key points and stick to them. and try and have something to back it up. If you are making a claim or an assertion, you know, a good hard-hitting stat, as any reporter will tell you, to back up your point is really good. So if you've, you know, if you've done a survey, you've done some research, and you've got some good figures there, use that as well. Also include your call to action. You know, what are you wanting the blog to achieve? You know, is it to launch a campaign? Is it to do with an event? Is it to do with an issue that you feel is really important to you? You know, so make sure you've got a call to action at the end, whether you're trying to drive people to your website or to hold an event for you or whatever. I think the tone's really important as well. It's not written the way you would do a conventional article. You say, right, it's got to be more sort of conversational in tone. So write like you would talk, you know, like you're just sitting down telling your friend about something that you're doing. My big no-no is, which again is across the board, not just blogs, there's no jargon or acronyms. And I think as a sector we're quite guilty of that. You know, we have kind of buzzwords and things that we use. And that's, you know, I think plain English, you know, okay, you are writing, if writing for TFN, you are writing for a sector, and people will know to a certain extent what you're talking about. But, you know, if you're wanting to get to as wide an audience as possible, you just think, well, would everybody know what that, you know, phrase means? I think the worst one I was editing a publication recently written by a colleague, and there was something about a multi-layer delivery approach, and I actually don't really know what that means. So if I don't know what it means, nobody else will. I think that's really important, and also it's got to be in sort of first person. It's written as an individual, even though you're writing on behalf of your organisation. You know, you're writing it as an individual, or you know, or somebody within your organisation. I think in terms of planning, you know, it is worthwhile if this is something you want to do consistently and not just, you know, once a blue moon. Have a content plan in place. Think about, you know, you'll be planning your activity anyway for the year, so build that into it. You know, think about the campaigns, events you've got coming up, but also look beyond that. Look at the bigger picture. If there's, you know, seasonal events or external things, you know, we've got Carers Week, Volunteers Week. Next week there's International Women's Day. You know, lots of things, and that gives Robert and Graham a hook to hang it on as well. If you're pitching it to them, year of young people, and I'm sure lots of you are working with young people and in your various activities, so you know, bring that into it as well. And the other thing is you can look at, to keep the topic, is look at TV programmes that are getting a lot of attention. One example when I was sort of researching for this that came up was Macmillan did a blog, I don't know if any of you remember, The C Word, which was written by Lisa, I think it was a book, or I think it was a blog actually, wasn't it, by Lisa Lynch. She was a young woman with terminal cancer, and she wrote an account which, after she died, the BBC actually adapted it, and Sheridan Smith was in it, and it got a lot of publicity, got a lot of pre-publicity. Well, Macmillan planned a blog post in advance of this, and they asked their members in their online community to share their thoughts about it, and apparently this was one of their most commented posts ever. So again, if you're wanting to get engagement from your audience and get feedback, that's a good way to do it, because that's something that, you know, that's much bigger than your organisation, something that people are aware of. So that's something to bear in mind. And the other thing is, if you're sort of panicking and thinking, how am I going to turn out a blog, you know, every week? I've got I've got everything else to do. You don't have to do it all yourself. You know, look at your other staff, look at your service users. You know, and you might find somebody who just genuinely enjoys writing, would love to get a chance to do something different from doing finance or whatever it is they normally do in their day-to-day job. And you're a bit like Charlotte doing something completely different from her fundraising. There's always a few hidden gems in there who would probably love to do something a bit different like that. And I think a good example of getting back, I keep coming back to the human interest story. I also do PR for Help for Heroes, and we do a lot of work around mental health. Well, we were running a campaign in January called Hidden Wounds, trying to promote the Hidden Wounds service, which is psychological support for veterans and their families, and particularly want to target families this time around. So I interviewed the wife of a veteran with PTSD who told her story quite eloquently and wrote it up. And again, one thing I was going to go back to is always make sure people see these, you know, don't just send it off without them seeing it. Make sure they see it and they're happy with it, and give it the sign off. So that's really important. But it was a very powerful story. You know, her husband hadn't been diagnosed properly. She thought their marriage was breaking up because she thought it was all to do with her. They just had a new baby. He wasn't interested in the baby. And it wasn't until much further down the line she had a bit of a light bulb moment, and he did finally get the diagnosis and everything fell into place. But you know, I offered that blog to Robert, and that said more about the campaign, I think, than than any kind of press release or anything I ever would have done, because it just gave it from such a personalised point of view. So it's look at, you know, you don't feel you've got to keep coming up with ideas yourself. Look at sort of the bigger picture and see what else there is that you can hang on to. And I think the personal stories often tend to be definitely the best way to get a message across. So
And can I ask just one final question before I pass over to the audience to ask you questions? Charlotte, when I read your TFN blogs, there's almost a sense of they're your blogs. You know as soon as you kind of start reading them. And there's an issue always hidden in them, but it's very much you that's all round about it. I know you can't teach people their own style, but how have you got to being able to do that?
Yeah, I'm not actually sure, but you're right. I definitely have at some point created maybe a character that is it's still me, but it's a slight exaggeration of myself. So I'm talking about the human interest thing. I've tried to take things like, I don't know, fundraisers enjoying cake, or, you know, being a little bit clumsy, or, you know, enjoying pictures of cats falling off things on the internet. You know, if it's kind of the human interest thing of something you think, oh, maybe people would engage with that, I'll emphasize that. I use humor quite a lot, I think. And I have to be quite careful with that, because sometimes it's a serious topic and I don't want to be treating it too lightly or belittling it, but also I think humour is quite a strong kind of thing to like keep people reading and have people engaging with it, and almost just like throw a different angle on things. So I don't know whether, I mean, I'd be interested to know whether people think that voice has developed over the years, or whether I went straight in with it, because I very much do sit down to write something with my TFN blog voice, and yeah, it's probably similar to my other personal ones. So it is, yeah, do you think about who you're writing as and who you want people to see? And if it's being shared on the internet as well, you know, how much do you want to share with people as well? Because I've talked about, you know, where I live and where I work and this sort of thing, and I think actually, although I want people to engage with it, I don't want them to kind of feel like they know me personally and can pop round for a cup of tea at the Seabird Centre. You know, it's so just somewhere in between those two, kind of creating a personality that's you, that you're happy to share and you think people will engage with is a bit of a process. And some of that comes out of the 2 or 3 points that I want to say as well, and the title of the blog as well will quite often be actually the message that I'm trying to give will be right there in the title. And that will be the message I finish with as well. That sounds quite waffly when, you know, one of the main messages is don't waffle, but you know, I'm happy to talk to people about, you know, how you do, you know, what they think about when they're writing, but don't try and go out there and impress people. I think, you know, I did a degree in English literature, but, you know, if I sat down and tried to write a blog in the style of Graham Greene, nobody would read it. So actually, how do you write when you're talking to your friends, when you're emailing people, when you're on social media? You know, that will naturally come out as your personality. What sort of photographs do you take when you're sharing them on social media? It's just an extension of you that goes into your blog. Does that make sense?
Thank you. So now's your chance. Does anyone have any questions for the panel? Yeah.
I just wonder with Carol, when you're writing for someone else, if it's your director or your boss, what kind of tips do you have for writing in that tone? Do you try and become them and write in their tone, or do they become you? And you're writing in your voice but writing as them?
I think it depends on the person, because I've had some people where I've written the blog for them and they've just okayed it, and then actually our new chief exec wrote a blog that's actually just got into TFN this week, and he wrote it himself, and I just made a couple of really minor edits, and you know, it was something he knew what he was talking about. It was an ecosystem of support for social enterprises, and he was the expert in that, not me. So I think it's kind of horses for courses, really. I think there's some people who you would know kind of what the message, you probably, maybe the slightly more formal ones, I guess, where, you know, you are maybe just rewriting a kind of key message about a campaign or something. That would be fairly straightforward if that was something you were carrying through all your comms work. I think if it was more issue-led, you'd be more inclined to let them do it, or again, if they're the particular expert, and then I would just be kind of the editor and just kind of tidying it up. I think if you are asking somebody else, whether it's your chief exec or, you know, somebody else from the organisation or a service user or whatever, give them a very clear brief. You know, give them bullet points, give them a word count. You know, don't let them go off and do War and Peace, and then they'll be really upset when you've chopped it down to 500 words. Be really specific what you want. And I know Susan and Graham and Robert would do that for us. If they were commissioning one from us, they would be quite clear about what they want. So, and I think, you know, again, I was talking about, you know, people from other parts of the organisation. We had a business advisor at First Support a couple of years ago who loved doing blogs, and it was for a specific purpose. It was for our accelerator programme. So we were kind of a bit more business orientated, but you know, he would go right about using social media to promote your business, and again, that was because he was quite a strong personality, and it was quite in his tone, and we did give him a bit more of a free rein because it was for quite a specific audience. So I think it really depends. It depends on where you're pitching it to, whether you use it on your own website, whether you're pitching it to TFN, whether it's a particular audience. So that's a very waffly answer, but I don't know. And I think if you are doing a lot of rewriting, I think it's probably quite important you take the time to explain to that person why you've done it. Fair enough if you're just doing sort of tweaking it to fit in with the style of the publication, or whatever. But I think if you were having to change it quite a lot, it'd be worth spending a bit of time with them so they don't. Otherwise, they might not want to do it again for you. So, and again, getting back to the sort of the case study type blogs, like the woman I talked about, I think if you're kind of almost interviewing them and then writing up, just always make sure they get copy approval, because it's one thing having a conversation with somebody over the phone, but it's another thing to see it in print or on the internet. So, but then that would be applied to everything, whether you're writing up a case study or using a quote in a press release. Really, it's just pretty good practice to do that.
Can I just say on that note that, you know, I do get a lot of blogs, we get a lot of blogs submitted to us, you know, from, on behalf of chief executives and senior management. But sometimes, you know, a blog can be like triple filtered by the time it goes through all the processes and all the comms people. But it's okay to have a view, and that's why you put a blog in the name of someone and not in the name of the organisation. You know, and it's okay to have an opinion. You need to remember that. That's what blogs are all about. It's somebody's personal opinion, and you can write on behalf of your organisation too. But it's good to, you know, include, you know, your take on it as well, and that's why you put it in the name of your chief executive. So, but sometimes when I get them, that's obviously you can see that what's happened through the processes. You can't say that. You can't say that. That's on behalf of the organisation. Well, you can, because it's, you know, within reason, obviously. Yeah. And that's what we like at TFN, just somebody to make a case, to make a point, to have an opinion. Yeah.
I think we're quite fortunate because we're a very small organisation, so we don't really have that level of filters.
Yeah.
You know, somebody will write something, I'll tidy it up and that's it. But I think I've worked in big organisations where you know, you'd be writing a leaflet and it'd go through 15 edits, and you know, you completely no recognition.
First port of great communications. I really do.
I think Rob will understand what I'm talking about when something goes through about 15 drafts and it bears no resemblance. And that's when something like a blog or opinion piece, you could end up losing that kind of passion and opinion.
There's another lady down the front there.
How much sort of creative license would you recommend, or sort of, I'm not saying that you should obviously line in blogs, I'm thinking I do blogs myself, not actually for my charity, but I will start doing it. And I did a blog about how I learned to drive, and I failed a lot of time. It was really horrendous and I was really sick. And when I passed, I was overjoyed. But the time I wrote this blog, it was like my legs were shaking all the time. It was just this biggest, and I felt like saying, how far did that veer from the actual experience? Because it was so many years ago, but I mean, it was awful, my driving experience, and I was really pleased. But it became a bit of, I was like, did that really happen? Because I did have an emergency stop, but I thought, I can't remember, so I'll make it an old woman. And she looked at me, I thought, I think I'm verging on lying there. But it wasn't a lie. I just thought, you know, it got really good feedback. I didn't actually publish, but I was thinking, is there a sort of effort to make it writing? It's quite, you know, creative. What would you recommend is I'm not saying you lie, but the element of how much maybe you could exaggerate that would still be ethically acceptable, you know?
I'm loving this question. I want to read that blog.
From my point of view, exaggeration for comic effect in a personal blog is fine. I mean, that sounds like a really nice way of telling the story. And that's how, you know, if you were telling that story down the pub to your friends, that's what you would do. You'd be like, oh, and then there was a deer startled in the headlights, and then I stopped and my coffee went everywhere. And that's quite fun, and it gets people's attention, because you're right, like, people will drop off in the first kind of, I don't know, it's probably very different for you. You don't want to, if I'm including anything that's factual, I've obviously got an opinion about things, but if I am actually directly quoting facts or references or something, I will obviously make sure they're true. I think yours sounds quite funny, actually.
Well, I mean, I did get good feedback, and it was basically fundamentally true, but I definitely added it for a bit more effect, so it was quite, you know, humorous. I think I was sick a bit more than I was and stuff, but it kind of, it wasn't, it was just my own, how I remembered it, and I did exaggerate it.
Humour's also humour's always good, but you know, like kind of what we deal with is like kind of corporate humour, and it doesn't translate very well sometimes. And it probably sounds good within the board meeting, but you know, outside that, you know, the life's going out of it.
Yeah, it shouldn't just be select that a few people get it.
Exactly. But from an individual point of view, you know, it's usually good. It's usually good.
I think one of the really early ones I did, I don't even know whether it's online anymore, was about when I came back to my car and I had a flat tyre and completely failed to fix this flat tyre. And I genuinely did go through all sorts of things like using chewing gum and sticky tape and trying to get the wheel nuts off, and somebody passing by who was able to help. And then I linked it into tips about how not to approach tasks when you're doing, you know, fundraising management or something. And a lot of those things were exaggerated for that reason, and the message was still the same, so I was kind of putting across a helpful point. I maybe wouldn't have written it like that if I was writing it on behalf of my charity. I don't
The
know.
message mine was, if at first you don't succeed,
Yeah.
try
So it's
try
perfect,
again.
yeah.
That was, there
yeah.
was a thing about if you're not good at a skill, so I did it in a work about the driving, it said, just persevere because you're not a natural,
Yeah.
it was like, here's my driving. So there was a sort of moral.
Yeah, that I mean, that to me that sounds great. But, yeah.
And also quite
How are you
engaging.
driving
Yeah.
now? Okay.
I don't drive anymore.
What's that?
I had a big cash and an out.
Yeah.
Might want to write a blog about that.
I think it's bringing
There's
it
a
back
lady
to being
just in-
relatable, because there's probably lots of people could relate to
Yeah.
that. And if you were using that to make a point, there's probably lots of people would read that and go, yeah, I feel like that when I did my first driving lesson or whatever. So you're engaging with
Lady
your
in the third
audience
row there.
with a bit of dramatic effect.
My question is, if you are a smaller organisation with limited capacity and time, do you have any advice on how you would continue to run a blog and ensure consistency when you may end up being quite sporadic? First of all, is it worth getting into the field of doing blogs if you are not sure you're going to be able to continue it every month? Is it worth doing one every year? And how do you ensure consistency of the kind of story that you're telling?
I would say write a blog when you've got an issue and you've got something to talk about. Otherwise, don't. Because what's the point of having? We were discussing this earlier. Is that, you know, a lot of organisations say you have to write a blog every week and it has to be updated every week. You just dilute your message. You lose the thrust of what you're talking about. It has more effect when you've got something to say. Sometimes we've got blogs from organisations often that we've never dealt with before that's hugely impactful. And again, it can be a personal story. So when you get a message and you think that message is important, blog, you know, you write about it. Often, you know, even, maybe I shouldn't say that, but sometimes blogs that aren't very well written, but have got, you know, quite a strong message, do quite well. So don't let it put you off. And certainly send it to us, because, you know, we'll take a look at it and we can always decide. But yeah, you know, small organised, that's what I always say, that especially, you know, sort of health-based organisations, community groups, sometimes they have sort of local information that nobody else has, and nobody else has come across an issue and they blog about it, because they're basically telling you news, they're telling you a story, and it does really well. It has a huge impact, and then other people relate to it, and we get a lot of comment, a lot of feedback, a lot of engagement on it, and that comes back to your organisation, so you'll get that. So I would suggest do it when you've got an issue, and don't worry about, you know, frequency. It'll take care of itself.
And I was going to say, from a resources point of view, try and, I know blog is slightly different from other types of writing, but try and get your money's worth out of it. You know, send it to TFN, put it on your website, link to it on your Twitter or Facebook. You might be able to, you know, if one of your staff has made a speech at something, you might be able to rework that into a blog. You know, so try and get as much, use it as many platforms as possible, rather than just, you know, spend hours on it and it just appears in one place. You know, try and repurpose it.
I think one of the things I found, I think early on when we started the TFN column thing was there were about 4 or 5 of us were doing one every month. And at the time I thought, oh my goodness, you know, the pressure and the deadline, but also it forced me to go out and look at the section and see what was going on as well. So I became more aware of issues and interesting things because I was kind of up against a deadline to try and find something interesting to write about. So not, like you say, only write if you've got an issue, but actually it also gave me a bit of an incentive to look wider than my immediate field, which was useful. So.
Okay, I think we've got 2 questions now, so we'll take the one here and then down the front.
Thank you. I was just going to ask about, other than feedback,
I think if it was something negative, I think you should try and respond. You know, don't get into a digital fight. But you know, if somebody is criticising your organisation, I don't think it's a good idea just to ignore that, because it's, you know, that's there for everybody to see. So I would try and respond as best you can and address their concerns, or try and take it offline. Just say, well, you know, would you like to drop me an email, or can we phone you and have a chat about it if they are saying something that's particularly critical. If it looks like they're just out for a fight, well then sometimes it's not worth your time and energy pursuing it. But I don't know if that's helpful.
In terms of evaluating the impact it's having, well, in one sense that could be subjective. Quite often it's not just blogs and news stories. We only hear about, the only feedback we get in stories from people is when we've made a mistake or people aren't happy with it. You know, you tend not to give feedback when people have just read it and passed on or quite happy with it. But there are actual physical ways that you can monitor feedback if it's online. You can use Google Analytics. You can, there's an array of tools that are quite easy to use. So they'll give you an idea of your reach, and you know, and you can use these to see what's working, what isn't working, and see what you might want to do more of, and what areas you might want to approach.
Great. And the question down the front.
I just wondered if we would like to send a blog to TFN, is it better to contact you with the subject, or should we just go ahead and write it?
That very much depends. Mostly I would say go ahead and write it. The thing about, I mean, every journalist, I've been on a billion of these type things, every journalist always say, and I've been on them before and always say the same thing, is we genuinely mean it. We don't have a lot of time. I've had blogs sent in, and we're hoping by nobody in here. And there are very strict stipulations. You know, they'll come in at, we've asked for 500 words, they'll come in at 1,000 words, and they're very strict stipulations. We must see this, we must see an edit of this, and we must see the headline, we must approve every single comma and full stop and colon in it. And when I get those just sit in, I tend to say no, you can't have that, because I don't have time. I don't have time to go into a 10-point back and forward edit just to get us to the stage where you're happy with it for us to use it in print. So I don't know. It can be. And I think that's slightly off topic, but it can be worthwhile phoning up or emailing in and saying we have a blog on this. Are you interested? Meantime, equally, if it's already written, it's worthwhile just sending in anyway. I think if you're worried about spending the time as to whether we'll publish it, yeah, phone us and email us first and check, because it might just say, nah, it's not like a thing we're interested in. So yeah, combination of both, I suppose. But I think that is an important point about not being too precious with copy. And it's different if we make a mess of it when we edit it and upload it. Fair enough, we'll hold our hands up to that and we'll make reparations for it. But once it's written, once it's out there, you can't be too precious with how it's handled, unless, you know, for example, we've massively distorted what the actual meaning is, or our editing has been so bad. We have to we have to edit stuff to fit the physical shape of a newspaper, but also just so that, you know, that things read properly, things go well online. And nobody's got time for a back and forward, you know, lit crit session, you know, which is what they come down to sometimes. So.
And it's very rare that we wouldn't run a blog, you know.
It is.
99% of the time we will run your blogs. We're there, you know, friend of the voluntary sector. We are there to, you know, assist. And so, you know, always keep that in mind. And if you need any help or assistance, you know, we can do that too. We can do it for you. You know, like, I've seen it time and time again that there's an organisation who's had a blog on its website, because they don't get many hits on their website, they're giving them, tell us, and we've got the hits for them, they've got the feedback, they'll get, you know, they've obviously got the benefit and impact of that. And we can do that, you know. Now TFN Digital gets huge amounts of hits. And people, you know, what, 3 years, we've been digital for 4 years. 4 years. And we'll get far and wide reach. And some of the stories go, certainly with that Huntington stuff, that went across the world, you know. And people engage, and we actually became a forum for them, you know, for that organisation. That's really interesting. You know, people were getting in touch with me, telling me that their entire families were affected by this and we're all going to die. Hugely, you know, really, really stressful stories and sad. And And I was saying to myself, what can I do with this? What can I do with this information? And, you know, but in some ways, the Huntington's Association, I had a few meetings with them, etc., and we kind of come up with a plan, and they were then in touch with these people as well. But that was hits that they hadn't got, you know, and we did that for us. We came kind of medium as such, and so and I appeal to everybody here, you know, to see TFN like that. You know, if maybe your website doesn't get a hit, isn't as impactful, send it to us, and we can see what we do. Because often we can, you know, have that success as well.
I think I spotted one last question. It will have to be the last one, but the panel will be here if anyone else wants to catch them at the end. Julie?
You mentioned vlogs.
Yes.
Does TFN have a YouTube channel? I'm just a bit confused about all of that. I know this is about blogging and vlogging.
We do actually, because we do have a YouTube channel. I used to do videos ages ago, but it used to take me a week, and I wasn't very good at them. We did like really long videos, and not many 45 people watched them, so we didn't do very well. But no, we do have a channel, but we don't really put much on it, I'm afraid. One for the future, something that, you know, I think vlogs are massive now. That's the next thing, but it's the thing now. Blogs are given over to vlogs. Graham doesn't probably know what a vlog is.
We'll work on that at next year's gathering event. Can I just thank the panel and thank all of you for coming as well.
No, I think I did as well. Oh no, you were fine.